begin by offering our respects to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram.
Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Okay, so what did we see in the previous class? We have chapter number
12.
30. We just started 30.
Yeah, we started.
Yeah. 13.
So by mercy of Prabhupada and Krishna, we finished chapter 12 in the previous class. We saw Krishna enlisting qualities which, if possessed by someone, makes the person dear to Krishna. So 13 onwards, he goes on to list qualities. And then in 19, he uses the word Bhaktiman, one who is engaged in devotional service. So we discussed how all these qualities that are there from 13 to almost 19, even a person who's in the mode of goodness, who's on the Sattva Guna stage, he can possess these qualities. But the quality of Bhaktiman, one who's engaged in devotional service, only a person who's in the transcendental mode of goodness or the Shuddha Sattva stage, he can possess this quality. And then in verse 20, Krishna concludes the chapter by saying that in the previous shlokas, of course, he said that is very dear to me, is very dear to me, is very dear to me. But in verse 20, he says, very, very dear to me. So what kind of a person is very, very dear to Krishna? Krishna says, those who follow the imperishable path of devotional service, those who are engaged in Bhakti Yoga, those who completely engage with faith and making me the supreme goal. So one who makes Krishna as a supreme goal, then such a person is very, very dear to Krishna. Krishna uses the word Ativa me priyaha, very, very dear. So with this, Krishna concludes this chapter. And then we saw the beginning of chapter 13. What's the title of chapter 13?
Nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness.
Yes, nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. So we saw how this chapter again begins with Arjuna asking questions. He asks 6 questions. What does he want to know? He wants to know Prakriti. What is Prakriti? What is Purusha? What is Kshetra? Then Kshetragya. What is Jnana and Jnaya? So what are these? Nature, enjoyer, the field of activities, the knower of the field of activities, knowledge and object of knowledge. So we saw in the previous class, Krishna has already answered question number 3 and 4. Krishna is not answering in the same order in which Arjuna has asked his questions. He's not explaining Prakriti and Purusha first. Krishna is explaining field and knower of the field. So what does Krishna say? What is the field? This body is the field, Krishna says. So our activities, whatever we do, this body is our field of activities in this material world. So we had the comparison of if there is a field in which the farmer sows seeds, then crops grow. What kind of crops grow in the field depends on the quality of the seeds that the farmer has sown. So what kind of activities we do in this body determines the results of the activities that we perform in this body. So this body is the field. Now, who is the knower of the field? Krishna says that one who knows this body is the knower of the field. So we ourselves, the individual soul, we know our body, right? Whatever is going on in our body, we know if something is paining, our head is paining, a muscle has been strained, we know what is going on in our body. So we are the knowers of the body, we are the knowers of the field. The individual soul is the knower of the field. So we went this far in the previous class. Today we have to start from verse number 3. Does anybody have a question before we
I
start?
had a question, Mataji.
Yes, Shreya.
So if we compare like the field with our body, then the knower of the field would be the farmer, right? Like they're two separate.
Yes, the one who's sowing the seeds in the body. Yes.
That farmer would be us, like the soul.
Yes, right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question, Mataji.
Yes, Gaure.
Yeah, so if we are the seed, then the seed has to be nurtured also. So the environment, of course, plays a significant role, and your efforts. But if you look in the analogy of a farmer who's sowing the seed in the field, then he's dependent on the sun, he's dependent on the water, rain, all these factors. So if we come back to our body again, so we are also getting nurtured, of course, the knowledge, through knowledge. So we are still dependent, isn't it, outwardly, just like how the farmer is dependent. So our body too is dependent on this outside sources, which will nurture our seed and make it sprout and make it, big into a plant or tree, whatever.
Yeah, so these external factors, as you said, sunlight and all that. So what causes, if there is a natural disaster, if there is a flood or something, that is also caused by our own karma, isn't it? So if the karma is good, then the demigods are pleased. If we perform our varnashram system to perfection, if we do our duties, then even nature, the demigods are also pleased with us, and they provide us with all that is necessary for the field to have good crops. So again, it boils out down to what kind of activities we are performing in this body.
So is it all karmic also? Like if you just see the also another scenario, like the children who are getting born or children who are there in Ukraine or Russia, I mean, they are just born into that country where they are not provided this kind of basic things, unlike India or some other country who doesn't have war or these kind of external disasters, So that's my question, this kind of confuses me. So I know it is all pre-planned. It is pre-planned, the will, as we, have seen in earlier chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna himself has said to Arjuna that this war has already taken place. People this you're killing, they are dying. They have died already earlier. So I mean, if you take that meaning, then it is correct. I mean, what is happening in Russia or in Ukraine, it's of his wish, of course. But the people who are affected by it, who are innocent, who are helpless, who have no other choice, and what will be their future?
Yeah, so people, we see that they are innocent, they are children, because we are only seeing this lifetime, but we do not know what they did in the previous lifetime. No, there is nothing happens by chance. The pains and suffering that we go through in this body is because of what we did in the previous lifetime. So the children in Ukraine or the people in Ukraine, whatever they are going through is not by chance. The seeds of that suffering that they are going through in this body in the current lifetime were sown in a previous lifetime. So it's again their own karma. It's not that God wants them to suffer. They are just paying for a past karma. So we cannot see beyond the current lifetime. So we feel that, oh, they are small children, they are innocent children, but we don't know what they did in a previous lifetime, you see. So law of karma is very complex. We don't know, we cannot understand.
So maybe they're evolving, if you want to say, they are also evolving, they have their level.
Yeah, each one of us,
different.
yeah, each one of us, whatever we go through, pain or suffering, whether we are in a war situation or whether we are materially also comfortable place, it's because of our activities in a previous lifetime. Okay, does that answer your question?
Kind of, but I feel if they have to build their future, they have to be born into a different environment. So they need to work here because that's what it is. The present is more important. But if they're not given that kind of exposure, how they work for the future? The law of karma will still affect them in their next life.
No, what if they want a comfortable body, a good body in the next lifetime, then they are sowing the seeds with their activities in this lifetime. And in this lifetime, doesn't matter whether you're in a war-like situation or in any situation materially, anybody can engage in bhakti yoga. If one engages in bhakti
The environment
yoga,
is,
yeah, because
the
see,
environment.
Arjuna is in the middle of the battlefield, and Krishna tells him, always think of me. So who can be in a more challenging situation than Arjuna?
But Arjuna was grown up and he has spent so much of time with Lord Krishna in his proximity as a friend before the war, and he knew. So he was a grown up. What was the age? I don't remember. Arjuna was maybe much older at that time when he went for the war. Whereas these children who are born into all these places, not particularly in the war zone, but even in Africa, you see, or countries where there is so much poverty and there is so much of hunger and crime. So those children, of course, is karmic as is a soul journey, but still, if they don't get the present, those kind of bona fide guru or inspirational, knowledge sessions, then they are still struggling. They are still on that same level, and they will not be able to rise. So does Lord Krishna has some different plan for them, or those souls, do they come back again and struggle, or they still get another opportunity to come out of this kind of situation? So that's where my concern is.
So coming to children who do not have the exposure, again, we have to understand that we carry our devotional practices, we carry on from where we left off. So let's say some child is born in Africa in a not a very favorable condition, but if in a previous lifetime he had left his devotional practices at 80%, then he's going to begin at 81%. So from childhood itself, he will have a certain inclination towards spirituality. We see though, even among children, we see some children who have a demoniac mentality, who are very violent by nature. They need psychologists. And there are some children who are already in sattva guna. They are like very peaceful, very quiet, very mature. It's because they are carrying on from where they left off in a previous lifetime. So that inclination for, even if a child is born in Africa, there are some children who are more spiritually inclined and there are some children who are less spiritually inclined, because each one is carrying on from where they left off. But of course, so if they come in touch with a devotee, or if they come in touch with a book, then everything can be overwritten, because a devotee of the Lord is more merciful than the Lord. So there is no excuse for someone to not follow bhakti yoga. The opportunity is there. Even a child can engage in devotional service. Even a child in the womb can engage in devotional service. If the mother is chanting, then the child in the womb is engaging in devotional service. If the mother is eating prasad, the child in the womb is engaging in devotional service.
Okay, thank you, Mataji.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, can we proceed with today's session?
Yes.
Okay, 13.3. So we need 2 volunteers to read. Who can read today?
I can do one.
Okay.
Can I,
Shri Hari Radha Mataji.
I
So
can
who
read
would
the
like
I can read the Bhagavad Gita.
the
Or
translation?
I'll do the other text.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So before we begin, please repeat Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Namo
Namo
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
13.3.
क्षेत्रज्ञं चापि मां विद्धि सर्वक्षेत्रेषु भारत क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञयोर्ज्ञानं यत्तज्ज्ञानं मतं मम
Need to display the chapter, Mataji. It's screen is showing nature, the enjoyer and the consciousness.
Oh, okay. Now, yes?
Yes. Thank you.
O session of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand body knower is called knowledge. This is my opinion. Hare Krishna.
So now Krishna is continuing to answer Arjuna's question on the knower of the body. Previously, what did Krishna say? That one who knows this body, that is the spirit soul, the individual spirit soul is the knower of the body. Now he goes on to say that I am also the knower in all the bodies. So there are 2 knowers of the body. There is not only one knower, there are 2 knowers. Who are they? One is the individual soul and the other is the super soul. Now, Krishna says that the super soul is the knower in all bodies, or that he is the knower in all bodies. So, see, we have to differentiate between the soul and the super soul. The soul, the individual soul, is the knower of his own individual body. So, I know what is going on in my body, but I don't know the aches and pains that is going on in somebody else's body right now. But the super soul, he knows what is going on in each body, in all the bodies. So the super soul is the knower of all the bodies. Then he goes on to answer Arjuna's next question about jnana. So he says, what is jnana? What is knowledge? To understand the body and the knower of the body is called knowledge. So Arjuna's question 3, 4, and 5 were, what is Kshetra, Kshetragya, and Jnana. Kshetra is the body, the field of activities. Kshetragya, there are 2 Kshetragya. There are 2 knowers of the body, the individual soul and the super soul. And what is Jnana? What is knowledge? Knowledge is to understand the Kshetra and the 2 Kshetragyas. Knowledge is to understand the body and the soul and the super soul, the 2 knowers of the body. That is my opinion, Krishna says. Matam mama. Matam mama, this is my opinion, Krishna is saying. So this also one may think that this is very strange. Why does Krishna have to say this is my opinion? You know, usually in our devotional life, if a disciple was to tell the spiritual master that, oh, but in my opinion, I think this is what it is, immediately the spiritual master will chastise. No? Srila Prabhupada would say opinions are not worth even 2 pence. Who cares for anybody's opinions? Because all this knowledge comes from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, full stop. We cannot change anything and we cannot accept or reject something based on our own convenience and say, in my opinion, for example, a doctor may tell you that it's okay to drink 1 peg every day. But that doesn't mean that it is fine, right? Because the law of karma does not allow us to engage in any kind of intoxication. Now, 1 peg a daily also. So it does not matter what is the opinion of the doctor or what is my own opinion. It doesn't matter. So opinions, there is no place for opinions. But Krishna is saying that this is my opinion. Why does Krishna have to say? Because what Krishna says is Shastra, right? All the Vedas as we discussed, are coming from him. So what Krishna says is the law. Why does he have to say, this is my opinion? Now we will answer this question in 2 more verses from now. For now, let's just understand this, that there are 2 knowers of the body, and the body is the field of activities, and knowledge is to know the body and the 2 knowers of the body. Now let us see some points from the purport. Let's read this.
Focus of learning, purport 13.3 continued. B. 2 knowers and their differences. Soul as the individual knower and super soul as a super knower. Super soul is a supreme proprietor of all the bodies, but soul is only for one body. Analogy, citizen is the proprietor of one land, but king is the proprietor of all lands. Supreme Lord is a supreme controller of the senses. Rishikesha, soul is the secondary controller. King is the original controller of all activities. Citizens are the secondary controllers. One is fallible, other is infallible. One is subordinate, other is superior. Analogy, it would be like equating the potent and the important. Supporting reference, Vedic literatures, Shitrani mentions there are 2 knowers of the body.
So see, Prabhupada explains the difference between the soul and the super soul by giving these analogies. Just as how the king knows all land and the individual farmer may know only his land. So like that, or okay, anyway, so like that, the soul is fallible, super soul is infallible. The soul is subordinate, the super soul is superior. The individual soul is the secondary controller, but the super soul is the supreme controller. So we differentiate between the soul and the soul. Both of them are knowers of the body, but still both of them are not at the same level. We can never become equal to God. The Mayavad philosophy is what? That right now we are under the influence of Maya, but once the influence of Maya goes away, then we become equal to God. So when they greet each other, they offer obeisances to each other because they say that you are Narayan, I am Narayan, we are all Narayan. And so therefore we are equal to God once we attain mukti. No, even after one attains liberation, still one remains subordinate to God. More points.
C. Definition of knowledge. To study the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely. D. Refutation of soul and supersoul as the same. Word cha indicates the total number of bodies. It indicates Krishna is present as supersoul in every body, while the atomic soul is present only in their individual bodies. Analogy, do not misunderstand a rope to be a serpent. Real knowledge is to know supersoul as the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyers, Kshetra and Kshetrajna.
So real knowledge is to know the super soul as the controller of both. Which both? The body and the soul. So the super soul controls both the body and the individual soul. Now, why do you think Krishna is not answering Arjuna's question in the same order? Why is he explaining Kshetra and Kshetragya first?
I think you need to know what your body is first, and you need to know on the external basis, then go internal probably.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
like
Because the
setting
first
up a
lesson,
foundation.
yeah, first lesson of spiritual knowledge is to know the difference between the body and the soul. Any spiritual lesson will begin with this. This is the basics. Because if we do not understand the difference between the body and the soul, then we cannot proceed in understanding transcendental knowledge. We will not be able to understand anything else. So the first lesson of transcendental knowledge, or the first lesson in spiritual life, is to understand the difference between the body and the soul. If we do not understand this difference, then we will not be willing to take up to spiritual practices, because then we will be in the bodily concept, and our entire goal would be how I can make my life easier. Bodily concept. I want to earn money. I want to have some savings. I want to earn prestige in the society. I want to be seen in the social elite parties. I want a nice house. I want a good car. So all these, all our activities will be revolving around how I can make my stay here comfortable, because I'm not able to understand that I am not this body. Because one has the mentality that, okay, I want to enjoy life. They say, no, gross materialists, they would often comment that life is to enjoy. Let's enjoy it. Or as long as we are youthful, let's make the most of this youth. So they engage in so many kinds of sinful practices. But when one understands that I am not this body, I'm spirit soul, that yes, death will come. Death brings an end to my material existence, but the soul continues. My existence continues even beyond death. Then only I will be willing to take up to spiritual practices, because I realize that I continue to live even after death. So here, when Krishna explains the difference between the body and the soul, he's like, hang on, there is existence even beyond death. So therefore, the first lesson of spiritual life is to understand this difference. Therefore, Krishna goes on to answer Kshetra and Kshetragya, so that one can get the basics right. And then he goes on to explain the other things. You know, Srila Prabhupada would give this example when he would preach. I learned this from Prabhu Nirantara only. That Prabhupada was giving a program and he asked the children, point out to your nose. So they would point out to the nose. So where is your heart? Here they would point out. Where is your hand? Where is your cheek? Like that, they would point out to the different parts of the body. And then Prabhupada would say, now point out to yourself. So then they would point out to different places. So Prabhupada said, no, but that you already pointed out when you pointed out to your heart. That you already pointed out when you pointed out to your cheek. So that's not you. So, you know, that then the person understands that I am not this body. So your heart, your nose means these are things that belong to you. So you are different from that which belongs to you. Like I may say, this is my pen, but that pen is not me, right? So my nose, that means my nose is not me. My hand is not me. So in 2 minutes, we get the practical lesson that you are not this body, you are spirit soul. There is a devotee in Australia. His name is Jagannath Ram Prabhu. And I was listening to his class. He's a Bhakti Shastri teacher. There are his classes are there on YouTube also. And he was saying in one of these classes that he was reading many books before he came to Krishna consciousness. He was reading many books by great philosophers, Indian and Western. And he happened to visit ISKCON Chowpatty in Mumbai. And there he comes across a devotee, Gauranga Prabhu. And Gauranga Prabhu asks him, do you know who you are? Very casually. And he says, yeah, my name is so-and-so. He says, no, I'm not asking for your name. I'm asking you who you are. Then he says, okay, which is your, where is your finger? And he shows finger, this is your hand, like that. Again, the same experiment time, what Prabhupada would teach. So he says that in those 2 minutes, he learned that which he had not learned after reading so many books on philosophy, because practical knowledge. Okay, so we see how Krishna also is going to the basics. Now, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that one should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. Now, what do you think is compared to the painter in this analogy?
Super soul.
The painter is the super soul, yes, God. And easel, or the stand on which the painting is kept.
That's a body, that is Kshetragya, that is what you call it, I think.
Okay.
Soul.
No, soul is the painting, and easel
Paint the painting.
Yeah,
Easel is the body.
Material nature,
Easel
material
is
nature, prakriti or material nature. So the painter is mounting the painting on an easel and he paints. So like that, God mounts the individual soul in material nature, and then he's controlling them, right? So there are 3 different entities. We should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. God, the living entity, and material nature. Now, of course, Prabhupada is giving a general example here, a very broad example for us to understand these 3 concepts, right? Painter, easel, and painting, or Ishvara, Prakriti, and Purusha, the individual soul, material nature, and God. But if one has to go into details, if one wants to go into technical details, what is the one thing that is missing here? What is it that the individual soul has that this painting does not have?
Individual soul has a
Black.
will of its own. Yeah, but the painting does not.
Exactly. Yes. Very nice. The individual soul, we have minute independence, minute free will, where we do what we are allowed to do, what we want to do minutely, independently, right? But that is missing in this example. So anyway, Prabhupada is giving a broad example to explain another concept. But if you want to go into technicalities, then this is the one thing that is missing. Okay, let's go to 13.4.
तत्क्षेत्रं यच्च यादृक् च यद्विकारि यतश्च स च यो यत्प्रभावश्च तत्समासेन मे शृणु.
Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, hence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activity is, and what his influence are. Hare Krishna.
So this verse is like a summary verse that explains all that is going to come up in the rest of the chapter. Krishna proposes to explain 5 points about the Kshetra, 5 points about the body or the field of activities. What is he going to explain? Let's read.
Text 13.4 theme. Krishna proposes to explain 5 points about the field of activity, Kshetra. Number 1, how the body is constituted. Explained in text 13.6 and 13.7. Number 2, what changes the body undergoes. 13.7 and 13.20. Number 3, how, when, and where the body is produced. 13.6, 21, 22, and 30. Number 4, identity of the knower of the field of activities, 14, 18, and 23. And number 5, the influence of the knower, 14 and 18.
So Krishna is saying that he will describe this only very briefly. So he says, please hear my brief description. He's going to explain this only very briefly, because remember, they are in the middle of the battlefield. If one wants detailed knowledge, then where does one go? Let's see what Krishna has to say.
ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतं छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रपदैश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः.
That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of the activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in the Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Hare Krishna.
So if you want detailed knowledge, then it's all described in the Vedic writings. It is especially present in the Vedanta Sutra. So here Krishna is giving references, Shastric references, that, okay, all this is available in all the Vedic writings, which have been described by the various sages. So let's take this question. Who is the highest authority on Vedic knowledge?
Vyasadev?
Vyasadev? Anybody higher than Vyasadev?
Are you asking for a name?
Yes, a name, a person. Who is the highest authority on Vedic knowledge? A person.
Krishna.
Krishna.
Yes,
Krishna.
Krishna. Yes, because everything is coming from Krishna.
From-
He spoke everything to Lord Brahma at the dawn of creation via the transcendental vibration of his flute. Yes. So there is no greater high authority on Vedic knowledge than Krishna. So then, why does Krishna have to provide Shastric evidence? Why does he have to tell Arjuna? Wait. Why does he have to tell Arjuna that what I'm going to speak is there in the Shastras? So why does he have to give Shastric evidence?
Because he needs his ignorance to go away. He's conditioning to go away, and he needs to provide a piece of proof for that. That what I'm saying is going to back up.
Okay, anybody else wants to try?
Yeah, like it's like when we are dealing, like just now we did. when we are going through the class, we say, okay, we have referred in section 6, verses 1 and 2, this thing. So similarly, even though the base of knowledge and the knowledge is already written in the form of Veda, Krishna, while explaining some other point, is telling, oh, okay, I have already explained that point in that Shastra. So it's basically cross-reference only. It's like somebody has written in a book, and in his lecture, he's telling, please read my book. There's a context there in chapter 5 or 6. You can understand better if you want to know more.
Okay, very nice. Anybody else
For
wants to give another perspective?
conviction as well.
Conviction. Is Arjuna going to be convinced by the Shastra? Will he not be convinced when he hears it from Krishna?
He hear it from Krishna. But Shastra and Krishna are one.
So yes, they are one. So why does he have to provide Shastric evidence then?
Because he said earlier that that is my opinion, and that is why he's just backing up with the Shastra, that see, my opinion and the Shastra are the same.
Okay. Any other perspective?
Because Krishna is his guru. He is listening from a guru.
Okay. So when a guru speaks, the guru speaks only from
Shastra.
Shastra. If the guru is bona fide and he belongs to a bona fide disciplic succession, he only speaks from the Shastra, or he speaks from what he has heard in disciplic succession, which is the same thing. Yes. So here Krishna has taken over the role of a guru. Srila Prabhupada explains this in the purport. Let's see what Prabhupada writes.
Krishna, in the role of Guru, presents corresponding references to Sadhu and Shastra. Srila Prabhupada states, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority.
So Krishna has taken up the role of a guru because on the battlefield he's Arjuna's guru, and as a guru he says, okay, so what I'm saying is also there in the Shastra. Actually, Krishna does not have to provide Shastric evidence because we cannot put Krishna in an arithmetical equation. He can override the rules of the game for his devotees. He can do whatever he wants. What he says is law. Okay, but still, because he is playing the role of a guru, he says, okay, see, even this is written in the Shastra. That's what a spiritual master, that's what a bona fide spiritual master does. And that's the reason why Krishna said in 2 verses before we saw, he says, this is my opinion. And then he says, look, what I'm saying is also there in the Shastra, just as our guru does. Okay, here we need to understand that Vedic system by which one progresses in self-realization can be divided into 2 categories. What are these 2 categories? We have the direct method and the indirect method. Direct method is what is easy to follow and what is recommended, of course, which is getting the knowledge from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, from the spiritual master, from a spiritual person, and from the scriptures. Now, indirect method, there are 2, Vyasti and Samasti. Now, what is this Vyasti and Samasti? Let's read here.
There are basically 2 Vedic systems by which one progresses indirectly in self-realization. One is called Vyasti, in which a person directs his meditation toward the self and thus seeks to understand the absolute by considering himself a fragment of the Supreme. For example, we can study the nature of the entire ocean by scrutinizing a drop. The second indirect method is called Samasti, in which one studies the entire universe while considering it the body of the Supreme. The second chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad, which Srila Prabhupada refers to in his purport, addresses the Vyasti system. The 5 kosas or shades, Annamaya, Pranamaya, Gnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, covering the living entity's true consciousness, are all manifestations of the Lord's energy and are progressively developed stages of consciousness in which Brahman, the absolute, the greatest, is realized. The koshas are objective levels of the Lord's energy and subjective levels of individual realization. Therefore, the self-concept of the living entity progresses according to these stages.
So what is the Vyasti system? In the Vyasti system, one goes from the individual to universal. So for example, I can study the drop of the water from the ocean, and depending on the study that I conclude from studying of that drop, then I conclude that the ocean is going to be like this. Okay, so from the individual, from studying the individual, I conclude about the universal. And in the Samasti system, one studies the entire universe and equates it to the body of the Lord, and from that he tries to understand the absolute truth. So in the Samasti system, the study is from the universal to the individual. Now in the Samasti system, there are 5 sheets or coverings of the consciousness of the living entity. So the living entity's consciousness is covered by different curtains or layers. Now, what are these 5 layers or 5 coverings of the consciousness of the living entity? Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. We will see each of this in detail. But before that, let us try to understand that actually all these coverings are present. The Lord has given us all these coverings, but each living entity has different levels of realization. Though all of them are given to us, each one has is at a different level of consciousness, because each one has a different level of realization. Let's see and try to understand this from the text.
A mundane example of how a concept can exist both within ourselves as a self-concept and without ourselves as a koshas exist as independent manifestations of the absolute truth is our relationship with our country of birth. We do not create the country of our birth. It exists objectively outside both our self and our self-concept. However, one in a specific level of consciousness will identify with his country and consider himself Indian or American or Russian. Dogs, monkeys, birds, etc. do not possess this level of consciousness and therefore are unable to identify themselves with the country in which they were born, although they certainly exist within it. In other words, all the koshas are given to the living entity by the Supreme. At the same time, their objective degrees of realization manifest.
So the different countries have been existing at the time we take birth, and even the animals, birds. But we identify ourselves with the country in which we are born. So we consider ourselves Indian. But a dog who is born in India, he doesn't consider himself to be Indian because he is at a different level of consciousness. We are at a different level of consciousness. Our consciousness is more developed than that of an animal. So although the countries are existing, because of the difference in our consciousness, there are different degrees of realization. So this is how we understand these 5 layers or 5 sheets: Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnana, and Anandamaya. So we will go into details of this in the next class, because Prabhuji will be joining us in probably 10 minutes from now. So we'll stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.